Right now, look up. The sun is exactly where it should be. But there was one year in human history when it wasn't, when the sun turned a dim, shadowy blue and stayed that way for 18 months. Crops failed. Snow fell in summer. Entire empires starved in the dark. It was the single worst year to be alive in all of recorded history, and almost no one today has ever heard of it. The year was 536. To understand how strange this is, you have to understand what people actually saw. There was no eclipse, no storm anyone could name. The sun simply dimmed. A Byzantine historian named Procopius lived through it, and he wrote it down. He said the sun gave its light without brightness, like the moon, for an entire year, as though it were in permanent eclipse. A Roman statesman named Cassiodorus noticed something even eerier. At noon, bodies cast no shadows. Think about that. The sun was still up there, but so weak that standing in open daylight, you couldn't find your own shadow on the ground. Not a dark night, a dark year, and Procopius wasn't alone. Writers in Italy, in the Middle East, in China, all recorded the same thing at the same time. A dim sun, a dry fog that wouldn't lift, blue skies turned the color of ash. People who had never met, separated by thousands of miles, all describing the exact same broken sky. So what happened next? The temperature fell off a cliff. With the sun veiled, the planet cooled fast. Summer temperatures across Europe and Asia dropped by up to 2.5 degrees Celsius, enough to trigger the coldest decade in over 2,000 years. In a world that ran entirely on farming, that is a death sentence written in advance. Snow fell in China in the middle of summer, killing the crops where they stood. In Ireland, the chronicles recorded in 4 flat words, a failure of bread. That's a soft phrase for something brutal. People who planted in spring watched nothing come up. And this wasn't one unlucky village. It was a global crop failure that lasted years. Entire regions ran out of food at the same moment, with nowhere to import it from, because everywhere else was starving too. Some historians believe whole communities in Scandinavia were abandoned and never came back. Their farms swallowed by the forest. And here's the part that's hardest to sit with. Nobody knew why. Picture a farmer, standing in a gray field at noon, no shadow at his feet, watching the seed he buried refuse to grow. No science, no warning, no explanation at all, just a sky that had turned against him, and a slow, spreading certainty that the world was ending. For millions of people, it must have felt like exactly that. But there was one clue to what was really happening, and it survived, frozen, for 1,500 years. Because 536 wasn't the end of it. It was the beginning. And the answer to what caused it didn't come from a dusty library. It came from a glacier. In 2018, a team led by Harvard historian Michael McCormick and glaciologist Paul Mayewski drilled deep into an ancient ice field called Colle Gnifetti, high in the Swiss Alps. Ice is a kind of time machine. Every year lays down a new frozen layer, and sealed inside each one is a sample of the air from that exact moment in history, including the ash of anything that erupted. When they analyzed the layer from early 536, they found it. Volcanic glass, chemically matched to Iceland. A single eruption so violent it threw enough debris into the upper atmosphere to veil the sun across an entire hemisphere. And then the ice revealed the part nobody wanted to see. It happened again, a second massive eruption in 540, a third in 547, 3 catastrophic blows, back to back, in just over a decade. The sky never got a chance to heal. The world was hit, and then hit again, and then hit a third time, each one landing on people already starving from the last. And a weakened, starving population is exactly what a disease is waiting for. In 541, right into the middle of this, came the thing that would finish what the sun started. History calls it the Plague of Justinian. It swept into the Byzantine Empire and tore through the Mediterranean world. By traditional estimates, it killed tens of millions, though some modern historians now argue that figure was exaggerated. Either way, it arrived at the worst possible moment, into a world already starving in the dark. Sit with the sequence. First the sky goes dark, then the crops die, then famine hollows out the population, and then, into that weakened, grieving world, a plague arrives to cut down whoever was left standing. This is why historians don't just call 536 a bad year. McCormick called it the beginning of one of the worst periods to be alive in all of human history. Not the worst day, not the worst year, the worst age. And it opened with a dimming sun. Now here's the part that should stay with you. Everything you rely on. The food in your kitchen, the climate you live in, the quiet fact that seeds turn into crops on schedule. All of it rests on one silent assumption, that the sun will keep doing what it has always done. We never think about it. It's the ultimate flip of a switch. The sun comes up, the world works, and we live as if that arrangement is permanent. The people of 536 believed the same thing, right up until the morning. It wasn't true anymore. And what's strangest is how completely we forgot them. We remember the wars. We remember the emperors, the battles, the dates we were made to memorize in school. But the year the sky itself failed, the year that quietly reshaped the entire ancient world, slipped out of our memory almost without a trace. Most people will live and die, never knowing it happened. For 18 months, our ancestors lived under a sun that had gone out. They stood in fields at noon and cast no shadow. They buried the people they couldn't feed, and they had no way of knowing if the light would ever come back at all. It did come back. The ash settled, the skies cleared, and the sun returned to the color we take for granted. Every single morning. But it left a lesson frozen in the ice, waiting 1,500 years for us to read it. The sky we trust completely has gone dark before. It can do it again, and it will never once ask our permission.